Good day and welcome, America and beyond. I'm Tom Donahue. Truth matters, really does matter here. Tom Donahue reports. So glad you are with us for this week's edition of Truth Matters. And I'm looking at many startling headlines over this past few days, and I'm going to tackle many of them. And of course, I will always give my discourse, and then you can discern and decide and decipher for yourself. And that's what we do here as truth seekers, liberty lovers, and freedom fighters. We always want to get to the bottom line truth to the best of our abilities. Now, Tucker Carlson had one of his grand awakenings. Now, how true this may be, I don't know. I mean, he's the same guy when he was on Fox News privately in his text messages that Dominion, because of their depositions, and were able to access phone text messages. He said Trump, he hated him, he was a demon, and he looked forward to him being gone from the political scene, in so many words. And then later, he rejoins Trump, campaigns with Trump, becomes a shadow advisor to Trump. And of course, Trump betrayed him along with all of us. And then he had his falling out. And now Trump says low IQ and, goes after him for, countless reasons because he's not a loyalist. So the words I was searching for in relation to this headline regarding Tucker Carlson is mea culpa. And it's in the headline. This was published by Mediaite. It says, "I'm sorry for misleading people. Tucker Carlson delivers jaw-dropping mea culpa for endorsing Trump." So not only does he have regrets, but he's blaming himself because he did put forward a lot of effort. And if you go back to prior podcasts and shows of mine, I talked about the bro culture, and that bro culture elected Trump. I mean, or they at least were instrumental in electing Trump. And I'm talking about Joe Rogan, and I'm talking about Tucker Carlson. I'm talking about talk show hosts, media and MAGA influencers, podcasters. But it was this bro culture and these bro MAGA influencers that played a pivotal role in getting Trump elected. And most of them now have said, see you later, bye-bye, rest in peace. So most have severed their ties, which is a good thing, in my view. Now, Thomas Massie, Republican from the great state of Kentucky, for his re-election bid, Trump has poured in, and the Republican Party, a lot of money to defeat him. And Massie is challenging Trump from within, according to Bloomberg, and he has at least half the MAGA base still with him. And that's because of his truth-seeking relating to the Epstein files and various other things that Trump has done to betray the American public. Marjorie Taylor Greene blames the Virginia election result on Trump, the redistricting that has backfired. The IG watchdog is requesting Patel's calendar, security details, and messages as they continue to probe his obscene and absurd behavior. And apparently he is a huge boozer and binger of alcohol. And we talked about that in the last show. Lindsey Graham, Fairy Graham, and again, I did coin that. And again, I don't really worry about whether I coined it or someone else coined it or who gets the credit. Hey, as long as we get the job done. And that is exposing these cast of characters. But Fairy Graham made his ritualistic election year plea for money on Fox News, and they said he doesn't need the money, and he is in a safe state politically, so it's highly unlikely that Lindsey Graham can be unseated. And, there's a lot of macho guys there in the state of South Carolina, and I don't know how they could want to vote for Mr. Bubble Wand, Fairy Graham. Now, Trump, over this redistricting loss in Virginia, as well as other states, and Trump started this ball rolling, and it's really backfiring, except Florida might, be a saving grace for him because of what DeSantis is doing, but we'll have to see. But he says, rigged election. Trump absolutely loses it over Democrats' big gerrymandering win. So everything that works against Trump, it's rigged, it's fake, it's hoax, it's phony, it's fraudulent, but not when he does it. No, and not when he loses. All the polls are great when they favor him, but when they don't, they're fixed, they're fake, they're frauds. Yeah, that's the way you like it. Megyn Kelly says she's stunned by the disastrous Trump polls. Even some Fox analysts and commentators are now saying that this looks bleak. This is really bad. There's just too many polls that have him in the low to mid 30s. And that's with a MAGA base, which, they make. I think some of these MAGA folks are probably still saying that they're behind Trump when privately they're not. So I think Trump's numbers are even lower than that. And the Drudge Report put up the numbers that Jimmy Carter had at his lowest ebb. Pretty comparable. Yeah, maybe even a little lower. So this president, ex-president, that actually did some good things in relation to Habitat for Humanity and lived a very simple life. And I was one of those guys that did expose Carter's links to Kissinger and David Rockefeller and the Trilateral Commission, how they put him into office and then they ran him out of office because they ran up the interest rates and the Federal Reserve said, bye-bye, see you later, peanut farmer. That's the way it goes when the New World Order is done with you. You're expendable. There's an expiration date. Yeah, so Trump would point to Jimmy Carter as the most failed, worst president in history until Biden. And then remember it was Sleepy Joe? Well, how about Drowsy Don? Yeah, Drowsy Don. At almost every cabinet meeting, he falls asleep. I mean, it's clearly evident and obvious that he's sleep deprived because he's up to the wee hours with his social media rants and tirades. But yeah, we had Sleepy Joe and Drowsy Don. We had demented Biden and deranged Donald. That's what we've got. That's what we had. Trump's threats to Iran are a boon for the prediction markets, including some backed by his son. We talked about that before. Some politicians are saying that the Trump family is the most corrupt first family of all time. And lawmakers torch Eric Trump over his Pentagon deal recently. Now, Greg Kelly, who I really haven't listened all that much to or follow, but he has really done a good job stepping up and calling out Pete Hegseth and his Department of Defense /War for his colossal failures. He says that good old Pete, he said, is an insecure, fake, and despicable secretary. That's Newsmax. If you don't know this already, Chris Ruddy, who was a really fine journalist who exposed the Clintons and the Clinton Chronicles back when he was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I interviewed him many years back. Then, of course, later he created Newsmax, which became quite successful as a magazine and online publication, and then later as a television cable network. And Ruddy is very close with Trump, and they have mansions very close by there in Palm Beach. For the most part, he's a protective shield for Trump, but I love the fact that he's allowing some of his hosts to call out Trump administration officials and cabinet secretaries and maybe Trump himself, but they have hired a lot of retreads of people that have had sexual abuse allegations against them. And we don't need to get into all that right now. I've covered that before. And, Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, whether it's a Matt Gaetz, whether it's Eric Bolling, whoever. I mean, these people have been fired. They've been accused, Bill O'Reilly, another one that's circulating around. It's almost like you see these celebrities that they'll do something dumb or they'll do something criminal, or something drug related, and then they rehabilitate their image. They recycle them, they rehab them. And that's what happens with politicians, and that's what happens with news talk personalities. And it's a shame. So you always have a second life or a third life if you are, in this realm. And of course, it happens with all the sports athletes. They almost always land on another team and get another shot for the most part. In one of the latest polls, over 20% of Trump's 2024 voters support impeaching him. These are Trump supporters, Trump voters. So we're nearing that 1/4 of his base, his voters. So that's pretty big. Now, Trump shares a doctored, unflattering Time cover of low IQ Candace Owens Vile Person of the Year. He's got a war going on. We've got all kinds of issues domestically and foreign, and he's got time to be in this, I'll just say hissing match with an H, with Candace Owens, a podcaster and an influencer. You can't devote this time to something more important? trying to make her look unflattering. I mean, she looks in this photo, which is so doctored, that she's a ghetto gangster thug. And if you look at Candace Owens, unless you are racist, unless you can't see beauty in other colors, in other races or ethnicities, well, then maybe you should tune out of this program, because there is beauty in all races and ethnicities. You can have a preference as it relates to dating, as it relates to what you see is more beautiful. But if anyone out there with some measure of intelligence and fairness doesn't think Candace Owens is an attractive woman, well, then maybe you need your head examined, okay? And then also, Trump had the audacity, and the ridiculousness of saying that Brigitte Macron, the French president's older wife, is much more beautiful than and more appealing than Candace Owens. Well, number one, both of them are married. Number two, there is no comparison. I mean, you'd have to be on drugs or boozed up like Cash or Pete to even ponder the possibilities that the French president's wife is even remotely attractive. But again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So that's how Trump is spending his time, doctoring photos, distorting the attractiveness of Candace Owens. That's what we got as a president. You would think this is a teenager in his basement with the internet, creating memes and creating, Dennis the Menace mischief. This is insanity. And speaking of more insanity, we're going to get to in the next segment, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the shooter, the attempted assassin, and what all this might mean. And we'll be right back. Tom Donahue, Truth Matters. Hold tight.
For nearly 250 years, Americans have enjoyed a level of civility and prosperity. Wicked globalist operatives threaten it all. And the chaos around us is the result of an underlying spiritual war. See through the deception and discover the root of the world's conflicts. A startling new book from the host of the Truth Seekers radio show, Soulless Society. Available on Amazon in softcover, Kindle ebook, and Audible. Visit www.soullesssocietybook.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
For every puppy purchased from a pet store or a breeder, a homeless dog at an animal shelter loses the chance of ever going for a romp in the park, chasing a ball, or feeling secure in a real home. Dogs and cats in shelters are waiting for someone kind to come along. So if you or anyone you know is ready for the responsibility of giving an animal a lifelong home full of patience, understanding, and respect, please adopt, don't shop. Visit PETA.org to learn more.
Conspiracy Radio, the new streaming station offering shows only from this unique, compelling genre. They don't want you to know, but we do. Conspiracy Radio, formerly Patriot Radio Classics, is now streaming 24/7 with the greatest conspiracy radio programs from past and present. Political to the paranormal cover-ups, conspiracies exposed. From legendary past hosts to groundbreaking present-day popular shows. Listen 24/7 online at conspiracyradio.net or download the apps at TalkStream Live, TalkStreamLive.com. Visit conspiracyradio.net. That's conspiracyradio.net. Conspiracy Radio. Follow the evidence. Question everything.
How serious is youth vaping? Irreversible lung damage serious. 1 in 10 kids vape serious, which warrants a serious conversation from a serious parental figure like yourself. Not the seriously know-it-all sports dad or the seriously smart podcaster. It requires a serious conversation that is best had by you. No, seriously, the best person to talk to your child about vaping is you. To start the conversation, visit talkaboutvaping.org. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Truth Matters and Tom Donahue Reports, where the truth really does matter, shedding light and insight on the prevailing controversies, cover-ups, and conspiracies, always from an America First, patriotic, independent, conservative perspective. And be sure to listen each week at the same time. Also find out more about our show at TomDonahueReports.com, so available for podcast listen and download on all major podcast platforms. That's TomDonahueReports.com. Welcome back. Tom Donahue, Truth Matters. It really does matter here. And let's get right to it. The White House Correspondents' Dinner. Trump decided this year to be a part of that. And he had, I guess, all the jokes and all the things lined up for his bow and arrow attacks, bows and arrows, if you will. And so he was all geared up for this. And at this Washington Hilton, apparently, based on multiple sources reporting that it was very weakly, very inadequately secured. And it's been a known fact for a long time when they have events there. And they had plenty of lead time to get it right. But even with the level of security, this Cole Thomas Allen was able to dart pretty close to the ballroom at that Washington Hilton Hotel. And he had multiple weapons. Now, there is a little bit of contradictory information. They said that one of the Secret Service agents heroically tackled him. Witnesses said that he fell down because he was running at such a fast clip. So we don't know which happens to be the case. We do know that one agent was shot, and that they don't even know whether it was the assailant or was it friendly fire. Now, I don't know if he's going to get Epsteined, and we don't know what's going to transpire, but more and more information will leak out. Now, he wrote a manifesto, and his conspiracy theories were quite poignant. Donald Trump didn't like it because he was not only a target, he wasn't the only target of this assassination attempt, but most high-level cabinet office holders were targets. But shotgun, knives, multiple weapons that he had on him. And apparently, one of the witnesses said he was taking these things out of his backpack. And so where are the surveillance cameras? Aren't these bags checked? And they said that many of the attendees stated that they just flashed a flimsy ID, or like it was a card number of like that what their number was, where they're going to sit. And there was really, they said, extremely lax security measures in place for the journalists, the politicians, and any and all attendees. So we just don't know why do these situations continue to reoccur where there's not quite right the amount of security or the right kind of security to successfully protect the president and other parties that are targets. Now, I can see that Trump he attends a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts. Many times he doesn't give a lot of notice. That's different. And he's probably been warned that they can only do so much. But this was planned in advance, well in advance. And it's right there in their backyard. Right there in Washington, D.C. So there's just no excuses. But this manifesto that I want to get into on the other side of the break, it's quite damning and Trump doesn't want to hear about it. And he took to task CBS News, 60 Minutes, because she was reading. She was not doing commentary. There was no opinion or speculation. She was reading from the manifesto and wanted to get the president's reaction and remarks. And of course, the first thing Donald Trump does when he doesn't like the question or he doesn't like the information, he goes into attack mode and gets very personal. This assassin, he wrote a 1,052-word manifesto that's been revealed. New York Post and other news sources published this, and I have not read it verbatim, but apparently at least key portions were attempted to be read to the president, 60 Minutes broadcast. And of course, he took great umbrage relating to who the targets were and what his gripes were. And yeah, it goes back primarily to the Epstein files. Now, again, his course of action is wrong-headed, immoral, unethical, and completely out of bounds. And I repudiate and I find it absolutely reprehensible, because you have to take up these matters politically and legally or through protestation, but not through violence. But according to the captured assassin, seemingly another lone wolf, another lone gunman. And before I read any more into this, it just seems almost deja vu, because not only has this happened before, and not probably the same person, of course, but the third known assassination attempt. But in the news, which I reported on last show, Marjorie Taylor Greene, MAGA influencers, and others, even those on the left, started questioning, and I think the left actually started questioning this much sooner, rightfully or wrongfully, and could be politically motivated, which isn't surprising. Much of the left and the right is politically motivated in their attacks and in their conspiracy theories. We're going to take a quick break. Tom Donahue, Truth Matters. We'll be right back.
For nearly 250 years, Americans have enjoyed a level of civility and prosperity. Wicked globalist operatives threaten it all. And the chaos around us is the result of an underlying spiritual war. See through the deception and discover the root of the world's conflicts. A startling new book from the host of the Truth Seekers radio show, Soulless Society. Available on Amazon in softcover, Kindle ebook, and Audible. Visit www.soullesssocietybook.com.
Okay, we are back. Tom Donahue, Truth Matters. Let's get right back to it. We were discussing, and I was quoting from those that felt that Butler, Pennsylvania, the assassination attempt, was staged. And this was all in the news, and I also covered it on the show. And then I did posit a theory. And again, it was pure speculation. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities that Trump, being a celebrity, an actor, his affiliation with Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, professional wrestling, one of their dirty secrets, which is not so much a secret now, that during many of their big high-profile wrestling matches, and it wasn't just WWE, it was WCW, it was NWA, etc., they learn to do blading, using the razor blade and, usually a little snippet on the forehead, but that could also be done to the ear. So I brought that up as a possibility, but not a probability. And I just think that it was worthy of at least saying, hey, if this was, and again, that the operative term is if, a big if, that Butler, Pennsylvania was staged for Trump's comeback and almost guaranteed election win by the way that they positioned that event that made Trump look like Superman and certainly hero status and those iconic pictures and statements and moments. Back to this. From what I can see here, it doesn't look like this was staged. Okay. It's just, and I don't know what the reasoning would be because we already have a war that's diverting attention to some degree away from the Epstein files. And then you have this assassin that's bringing the Epstein files back into play, into greater focus. So it kind of defeats the purpose. I don't really know, people are, I don't know what the rationale for the staging would be, except for whether it's the left or the right. They always take advantage of an event, even if they weren't the ones that inspired or by design or creation. They say, okay, what can we do now that this event has happened? And they always capitalize on that. And Trump has, with, demanding the ballroom be funded and built. Trump, of course, mischaracterized by stating that, if this was held at the White House and we had that ballroom, well, they couldn't have done it because based on the numbers, the square footage, that ballroom is going to would have been too small unless they were to leave out many of the journalists, the reporters, and other guests, maybe leaving fake tears, Erica Kirk, maybe she wouldn't have been able to go. No, but she's a favorite daughter to the Trumpsters. So, yeah, she would have been there anyway. And of course, she had the tears going again, the fake tears, the invisible, imaginary tears. But we'll just leave it at that. But she's everywhere. Wait, who's taking care of these kids, these young kids? Charlie's probably looking down from heaven and just saying, will you please be a mother to these children? There's no requirement for her to be at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. She's not a journalist. She's not a reporter. She's not a very good fill-in host even for Charlie's show. I mean, she's somewhere, unless she realizes that Turning Point USA, which is turning down USA, because the crowds are way down. They're turning downward. She then will cancel under the guise of security threats, which was nonsensical because the vice president was there and Secret Service did not alert him that there were any security threats to be mindful of. So back to CBS and 60 Minutes, Norah O'Donnell tried to read from the manifesto and wanted to get Trump's reaction. And of course, he was as vicious and vile and attacking, and he likes attacking women. He really seems to pride himself on that. Really tough guy, Imagine that being your mother or your daughter, the way he talks about women and talks down to them. But the assassin said he was a citizen of the U.S. And what my representatives do reflects on me. And I'm no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. Well, to be completely honest, I was no longer willing a long time ago, but this is the first real opportunity I've had to do something about it. So he was very fixated on everything surrounding the Epstein files. Now, it seems to me that this was kind of odd that all the major cabinet members were all there in attendance. Usually they try to keep a couple key officials away in the event that something happens. But really, I mean, if this one guy got that close with some makeshift weapons and really no military background, what if true assassins wanted to take out that entire Trump cabinet, the Trump administration? They may have been able to do that. So very odd that the Secret Service, I mean, how many more attempts do they have to have where, and of course, Trump was praising them and all that. And, I mean, some of those guys, they try to do good work, based on what the circumstances were. Whoever was the brainchild, the mastermind overseeing the layout and the security plan, not so good. But the rank and file tried to do their job to the best of their ability, and he was stopped. And one guy thankfully he had the vest on and he survived. But we don't know if that was an assassin's bullet or it was friendly fire. They still haven't made they haven't made it official. That would really be sad if that was friendly fire, But nevertheless, he survived. But yeah, so the manifesto, it's all shown to be and fueled by the Epstein-related stories. Now, Trump would say, "Oh, it's a hoax," and see if it's the media propping up this fake story about Epstein. And yeah, it's not so fake. And we only have 50% of the files, so I can only imagine what's in the other 50% or the documents that have been shredded. Fox News host says it was a failure and grills FBI chief Kash Patel relating to the security mistakes. Liberal podcasters accuse Stephen Miller of using his wife as a human shield during the shooting. And when you watch the film, you can see that he's actually got her in front of him, moving her forward. So he was not really protective of his wife, Mr. Tough Guy, Stephen Miller. So, back to the CBS. I didn't mean to, I'm kind of meandering like Trump, I'm here, there, and everywhere, but there's so much to cover and it all kind of is interrelated. But he calls the 60 Minutes female host disgraceful for reading from the suspect's alleged manifesto on the air. So Nora O'Donnell is a disgrace. No, you're the disgrace because you're the million-man mention in the Epstein files. Yeah. And I've gone into tremendous detail, and so have many, many podcasters and mega influencers and social media people. So sadly, talk radio is delinquent and absent as it relates to really covering the Epstein files, except for maybe the suspicious so-called suicide, which I give them a little bit of credit there. So the shooter, the assailant, or the attempted assassin, he sent writings to his family minutes before the attack. But there are many, many conspiracy theories floating around. And of course, what was trending the most around this assassination attempt was staged. That's the term, staged. So this is how suspicious so many people are online. And again, for the record, I don't think this was staged. And that's just my opinion. I don't have enough facts. I don't have enough information. That's just, just from what I've observed, what I've heard, what I've seen. That's just my raw assessment, but I could be wrong. Here's an article from The Hill. It says the Trump assassination attempt sparks new wave of unfounded conspiracy theories, quote unquote, staged. Well, I am going to look at all the evidence. I'm going to listen to some of those voices just to hear, what they have to say and see if I can make sense of it. But I'm not going to just throw anything out there, but it is worthy of discussion. I'm just saying that I have not come to any conclusions. We're very far away from that, in my view. Now, some MAGA senators, United States senators, are pushing back where Trump is saying he needs this money right now for this ballroom, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because if Trump was fortifying himself at the White House, wasn't going anywhere else for meetings, for visits, for government campaigning, then that would be a different story because it's not Fortress America. It's not Fortress White House. And he loves getting out and about, whether it's golfing, whether it's, meet and greets or rallies and going to sporting events. And so the ballroom would only serve very limited purposes. It's not going to keep the president or others secure 24/7. So that's just a ridiculous argument. Now, Senator Rick Scott, who's considered a MAGA U.S. senator, he pushed back on this proposal for $400 million in taxpayer money to build 90,000 square foot ballroom at the White House, arguing Congress needs to rein in its deficit spending at a time of historically high national debt. He said, we have a $39 trillion debt. Maybe we ought to stop spending money. Well, that's what the Republican Party their rhetoric used to be, that tighten the fiscal belt and cut spending and be deficit hawks. And that's all went out the window with Trump. Now, Lindsey Graham, Fairy Graham, and you, yes, Mr. Bubble One at Disney World, you are going to be continued to be labeled Fairy Graham, like it or not. So Senator Lindsey Graham, Fairy Graham, is pushing a bill to fund the construction to secure the 90,000 square foot ballroom at the White House. The project is essential to national security after a gunman tried to storm the White House Correspondents Association dinner. So Lindsey Graham, Fairy Graham, has teamed up with Katie Britt, Republican senator from Alabama, and Eric Schmidt, Republican from Missouri, to authorize the construction of the ballroom and the military secretive complex beneath in case of emergencies. Well, I have to go along with Rick Scott and others by saying we're not funding this foolish project, period. Case closed. So we're going to pause here, come back for the final segment, and we're going to close it out with a few more subjects. So stay tuned, right back.
For nearly 250 years, Americans have enjoyed a level of civility and prosperity. Wicked globalist operatives threaten it all. And the chaos around us is the result of an underlying spiritual war. See through the deception and discover the root of the world's conflicts. A startling new book from the host of the Truth Seekers radio show, Soulless Society. Available on Amazon in softcover, Kindle ebook, and Audible. Visit www.soullesssocietybook.com.
For every puppy purchased from a pet store or a breeder, a homeless dog at an animal shelter loses the chance of ever going for a romp in the park, chasing a ball, or feeling secure in a real home. Dogs and cats in shelters are waiting for someone kind to come along. So if you or anyone you know is ready for the responsibility of giving an animal a lifelong home full of patience, understanding, and respect, please adopt, don't shop. Visit PETA.org to learn more.
You're listening to Truth Matters and Tom Donahue Reports, where the truth really does matter, shedding light and insight on the prevailing controversies, cover-ups, and conspiracies, always from an America First, patriotic, independent, conservative perspective. And be sure to listen each week at the same time. Also find out more about our show at TomDonahueReports.com, also available for podcast listen and download on all major podcast platforms. That's TomDonahueReports.com. Welcome back, Tom Donahue, Truth Matters, and we're in the final stretch here. And we went kind of long in the third segment, so we're going to have to do kind of rapid fire through some of these things. But here is an interesting one. It says approximately 6 in 10 say they try to avoid Trump news. So some people, they just are putting their fingers in their ears, or when they're around family or friends, they don't want to hear Trump news. They don't want to discuss it. And I'm experiencing some of that around me as well. So I'm sure you are likewise. Well, in my opinion, sadly, the House approves reauthorization of the warrantless spy powers, FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And it wasn't even close, 235 to 191. So again, we can be spied upon. We can be intercepted. We can be interfered with. We can be infiltrated. And, there's not a darn thing we can do about it. So Americans beware. James Comey indicted again, and he was indicted for, remember the social media post with the seashells that he said he just happened to stumble upon, which, is kind of ridiculous in and of itself. But it showed 86ing 47. But Garrett grills AG Blanche on whether DOJ will charge MAGA influencer for making the exact same comment that Comey did when he said 86-46. So that was CBS's Major Garrett. Remember, he was with Fox News at one time. He was grilling the AG, the acting AG. You miss her soft voice. She talks like this. Weird, strange. Another peculiar one. Trump didn't like the word weird when it was referred to him in his cabinet post. And I think we got to keep that term alive because he didn't like that. But he and his cabinet fellow cretins are weird. Okay. Anyway, this case will go nowhere. This is a desperation case. This is a Hail Mary. I mean, I despise Comey. I think he should have been fired at the onset, but instead, Trump let him continue doing damage for a good 6 months before he finally fired him. So, Trump is responsible for many of these deep sea creatures of the swamp, the political swamp and cesspool. Remember, because Hannity recommended him, he said, "Oh, he's a good guy now." Warmonger and chief neocon artist John Bolton. Trump has a knack and a tendency for hiring a lot of these people that are just simply no good or completely corrupt, or they are inadequate in terms of knowledge, experience, and just general know-how to do the job. Protesters berate quote-unquote war criminal Hegseth before his testimony on Capitol Hill, and that the fireworks certainly went off there, and the Democrats, more specifically, really called him out on his hypocrisy and his failings. So I guess in closing, we do have conspiracy theories that are circulating, and the number one trending term around that White House Correspondents' Dinner assassination attempt was staged. So we'll have to continue looking into this. At this juncture, I don't think there's enough evidence or facts in evidence to state with any great certainty whether this so-called lone actor, the lone wolf, really did operate completely on his own. Was it his own devised plan? And how did this one single guy get so far and so close? And why? Oh, final thing here. Kash Patel, Jeanine Pirro, I know they weren't planning to give talks, but boy, they looked like they were toasted. They looked like they were having a grand old time, liquored up, and it showed at the podium. And no one mentioned that. And again, I can't fault them completely because they weren't showing up to give a speech. All these journalists and all these networks, they all had their little parties even prior to this. And I'll tell you, that swamp that includes the media as well as the politicos, man, they really party hard, and they are. It's a party environment. Whether they come together and party hard, it's a ship of fools. But yeah, I just want to make the mention of that beyond the conspiracy theories, and the fact is we don't know enough to really conclude anything except for his capture and except for the fact that, Trump did talk about, there's so much love in this room and there was so much togetherness and we were so unified. And then as soon as someone brings up what's stated in the manifesto, he goes on attack mode and all that love turns to hate. And again, it's one thing if they accused Trump of anything, but that's in the manifesto. Whether you like it, Trump, or you don't, this is what the guy wrote. And Trump just cannot be dignified when it comes to being asked questions. Now, he looked dignified at the podium after all this happened, and he was strangely calm, and so I don't know how to explain that. And also the fact is that the Secret Service seemed to be more concerned about J.D. Vance than anybody. That's a little bit odd, too. And, we talked about J.D. Vance's background and how he got himself positioned where he is. And that's one dangerous guy lurking in the wings. So in closing, a few of the main points that stand out as to why there are conspiracy theories swirling as it relates to being staged, the assassin and the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Washington Hilton, is Trump's justification for having the ballroom funded, because the courts said that only the basement, lower level, for security reasons, not the ballroom, can be funded and built. And you can see that Trump was trying to either use this, or was it concocted and staged in order to likely ensure the ballroom's building and funding. Secondly, was it a diversion from the war? And some were thinking the Epstein files, but the Epstein files is brought back into play because of the manifesto. Another rationale that's been circulating is his poll numbers are so historically low. I mean, we're talking in a tie with Jimmy Carter, and in some polls even lower approval. And would this bounce back because of the assassination attempt, similar to what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania? The other point I want to bring up is that I'm noticing with Trump, beyond the weirdness, beyond the narcissism, beyond the possible onset dementia or Alzheimer's, the erratic behavior is that there's a Jekyll and a Hyde. We saw the Jekyll come out when he talked about the love in the room, and he took the podium, and he was so gracious, and he can be that way at times. And you see this with King Charles and various other luminaries that he hosts, and sometimes in interviews, as long as he's not feeling uncomfortable or feeling cornered or accused of something. And then you see this guy just go completely ballistic, that he cannot contain himself. So typically that grace period, it's sort of like the ceasefire. It just can't last indefinitely. So anyway, these are some closing observations. We're going to continue delving deeper, as we always do. We won't have preset notions or premature conclusions. We'll continue seeking truth, because the truth matters here and should matter with you. And we'll pick this up and more next week. Till we meet again, Tom Donahue, Truth Matters, TomDonahueReports.com. Take care. Have a great week.